Today we're going to talk about investing, which is our normal topic. We just get there in various different avenues. But there are things that investors do not want to know that just scare the dickens out of them. And there are ways to deal with that, which we want to address, and how you can make better decisions. I'm Don Creech.
And I'm Perry Sykes, and welcome to the Investor Resources Podcast.
So if you watch the movie A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson, who played Colonel Jessup, he was on trial. And the high point of the trial, which was the turning point, he shouted at the prosecutor, "You can't handle the truth."
Right.
You remember
That was good,
that
Don.
scene?
That was good. Yeah.
And in fact, for many investors, that's really reality. Nobody wants to deal with the truth of investing. A recent research report put out by university professors, so a lot of it gets academic. We're not going to get into the academics, but one thing he discovered in his research about the stock market going back to 1929 is that most stocks fall 85%. That's the median. Now, the average, some stocks actually do worse than that.
Right.
And recover, which is what everybody wants to believe they own. But actually, there are very few stocks that recover to regain their prior high and go beyond. That's
Correct.
A small handful. In fact, there's only about 2% of all the stocks that actually contribute to the real return of the major indexes.
Those are the ones you can't count on them, but those are the ones that have taken those big losses and then they return to their all-time high and then they advance from there. So over time, they're actually building on their past gains and building in more gains, but that is not the norm. Most stocks don't do that. Most stocks are always in a state of drawdown, and like you said, Don, sometimes worse than 85%. They'll go to zero and they disappear. And there's nothing abnormal about that. It happens all the time.
And it's about the time they are going to hit zero. They're in the minus 95 to 99% time. If they're in an index, that's the time that they come out of the index. The index.
Might look at those now. Yeah. Now we'll take a look. They're almost 100% loss. So maybe we'll take that out now. And that's the kind that is the kind of management you get if you're relying on an index to keep the losers out of your portfolio. They'll be gone, but not till after they've taken an enormous loss.
Well, and the corollary to that is they don't get added to the index when they are just breaking above their IPO or their initial innovation stage. They get added to the index typically at their all-time high.
Yep.
Index additions are at the highs and they're removed just before bankruptcy as a general rule. That's passive investing at its best.
Yep. So the bottom line there is, unless you're signed up for decades long time frames, you're not going to get great performance from those indexes. And part of the reason is that they just never play defense. They'll ride those stocks down, and the vast majority of them are not coming back. Like you said, Don, that's what everybody's waiting for, the big recovery. That's not normal. That doesn't usually happen. The much more normal circumstance is a huge loss and then hang around for a little while and then go ahead and lose some more. So it's not great when that trend sets in.
Even when you're lucky enough to get a stock that you have picked a stock that does recover, after that 85% drop, they typically don't get back to their all-time high. They typically get back no more than 95%. You're still waiting for that kick into the stratosphere where you make up for perhaps years of being underwater because you believed in the product. You believed in the company's CEO. You have belief in their new product innovation, which is like the weight loss drugs of recent months and year. And then all of a sudden, there's a replacement or there's a problem in court, and it just dissipates. But everybody needs to lose weight, at least in America, because we're
How can
well
this myth
fed here.
it's going to work? And it just feeds into there's a long-standing rule of thumb with um, individual investors, and that is don't sell at a loss. I'm going to wait till I break even, and then I'm going to unload this thing. It's a dog, and I know it. But as soon as I break even, as soon as I get my money back, well, I'm going to get out of here. You can be waiting a long time for that, because like we've been saying, most of the time that doesn't happen. And you're much better off seeing that it's not working out for you, and cut your losses quickly at the beginning, and not hang on to those stocks that are losing you money. Nobody buys a stock to lose money. And if it turns out that's what it's doing, you need to look at that much harder and much closer than the narrative of, oh no, this stock's going to be great someday. And more often than not, that's not the case.
So what happens in that particular case is that you're probably in the wrong sector. The stock that you
Oh yeah.
own is not doing well because the economy has shifted and we're in a different part of our economic cycle, economic growth, and different
Right.
industries do well during growth cycles, during recession cycles, and during transition cycles. So major portfolios do rotation. Now, if you're in a mutual fund, they can't go to cash. And unless they're a specific
Right.
sector focus, they aren't going to concentrate on the sector that's doing well. They're just going to mitigate that by maybe a little over concentration and underweight the sectors that are losing, but they're not going to sell the losing sectors. They have
Right.
to hang on to them. That's the way diversification works. But Warren Buffett is known for having said diversification is for people who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Concentration is how you deal with the averaging of returns and trying to compensate for your emotional response when markets drop. One of the other ways to deal with that is, and you've heard this before, think outside the box.
Sure.
You found an article written by another individual who we don't know, and he put it this way. He said, invert your thinking and start asking different questions. Instead of saying, look how great this is, what a great product this is, start asking,
Sure.
what could go wrong here that's going to cause me to lose my money? And examine the downside risk instead of getting FOMO, fear of missing out, and jumping on a bandwagon that is full of speculation. And in recent months, there have been a lot of those things actually in our current market.
And you just mentioned Warren Buffett over at Berkshire Hathaway. Well, his prime partner for decades before his recent passing, Charlie Munger, that was his first rule. Always invert your thought process. So like both of them said many times over, we've gotten fabulously wealthy and fantastic returns primarily just trying not to be stupid. We do not go out and look for the big home run. We do not do that. We ask ourselves, what's the worst thing that could happen to this portfolio? And then we try not to do that. And the rest of it will take care of itself. Just don't allow yourself to make that big mistake, especially if you're just swinging for the fences and hoping, well, this is it. This has got to be a home run. Let's load up. Most of the time, that's not going to be true. So don't make the big mistake. Don't fly yourself into the ground on purpose. And if you can avoid that, things are going to be much more on your side, much better chance of making profitable trades, because just like Munger and Buffett, you're not dumb. So you're going to look for things that have a chance to do well. But if they're not doing well, get rid of them and move on. And that's one of the primary lessons from Berkshire Hathaway.
Just kind of to reiterate, because they're really important points. What you said is it's important to avoid big losses. Preserving your capital is more important. Making a home run when it happens, you should consider to be lucky.
Right.
Making a good investment that's not going to cost you your portfolio is more important than going out and swinging for the fences, as you said, hitting the big home run. if you're steady about your discipline, first of all, you have to have a discipline. It means you have to have a process, which means you have to have rules, and the discipline to follow the rules that you've established in your portfolio for making decisions. So you don't go out and do something stupid. That's what rules are for. I mean, even presumably a lot of you who are watching us, listening to us, you're old enough, you already have kids. And when you were raising your kids, you gave them rules, not to punish them, but to avoid them getting into difficult situations that could harm them. And portfolio's no different. You want to avoid the harm of doing something that made no sense because you didn't take time to figure it out in advance.
Right. And you need to give yourself enough credit that if something's not working, yep, that was a good decision. There was no reason not to make that purchase, but it's not working out. And they're never going to work out, all of them. There's nobody that bats 1,000 in investing. And when that comes to your portfolio, which it will, you need to roll with the punches and say, you know what, that's not working and let's move on. And that's how you don't ride that stock down 85%. In the beginning, when it starts to go south, you can look at it again, revisit why you bought it, and then realize it's not doing what I needed it to do. It's not doing what I purchased it for. So that doesn't mean you made a mistake. That means that security is not working out. Sell that thing and start looking for the next one. Don't just write it into the ground, believing at some point it's just going to turn around.
Well, and it's not a disadvantage necessarily to be holding some cash in your account while you're looking, because you run across something that you finally make a decision. This thing makes sense. I've been searching and searching and searching, and you're frustrated because you're not invested in the market's going up, or at least it looks like the index is the market's going up because the indexes are. And we're in another year where the index activity and direction is disconnected from the broad stock market. So it's important, again, to think outside the box, or inverted, asking the questions, what could go wrong if I do this? What's my downside risk? Let's control that, because that's the most important thing I can do. And that's not a function of your age, and it's not a function of the size of your account. I mean, if you go looking for how to manage risk in a portfolio, the common answer starts with, how old are you? How much money do you have? And how soon do you need to spend it? Nothing has to do in that scenario with what kind of risk is in the market and what kind of risk is associated with the stock or the mutual fund or the exchange traded fund that you're thinking of buying. You have to think differently. Change the way you look at what you want to do to control the actual risk. And as you just said a moment ago, Perry, when it's not working, don't pray about it that it's going to be okay in the long run. My goodness, in the tech bubble, Microsoft took 13 years to break even. In those 13 years, there were some major recoveries in the stock market in other sectors of the market. It would have been a better decision to have sold it at a small loss, bought multiple other things along the way, and repurchased Microsoft back at either a lower price or as it was moving up near the price in which you exited. You would have made money along the way instead of hanging on with no return for a stock that eventually worked out. It's one of the exceptions that after a big drop recovered and went on to new highs. But those are the exception to the rule. Management of your own decisions and your own rules should be priority. You do not want to blow up your own account. Anyway, if this makes sense to you and you want to talk about it in greater detail, you can give us a call. The phone number's on the screen. You can send us an email. We'll be glad to have a discussion with you. It's a freebie. We're available. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, do so. Stay in touch. We'll be posting more shortly. Have a great day.